Hello and welcome to the Interface program. Today we have with us Professor R. Raj Rao, author, Professor of English Literature at Pune University and one of India's leading gay rights activists. Sir, welcome.
Thank you.
We will begin our discussion with your own writings.
I have been writing for almost 25 years now, so it's been a varied output. I've written poetry, short stories, novels, a biography of the poet Nissim Ezekiel, lots of critical writing and non-fiction, academic papers and newspaper columns, so it's been different things that I've been doing, different kinds of writing that I have done. My creative writing, of course, is poetry and fiction and also a few plays. This is what I regard as important, but the other work is equally important. The critical work is important. My biography of the poet Nissim Ezekiel still remains the only biography of a post-independence Indian poet in English. And then I've done some translations as well. A recent book of mine, a recent publication of mine is a translation of Lakshmi. Lakshmi is a transgender activist, and her autobiography, which first came out in Marathi, has been co-translated by me along with P.G. Joshi, and we've translated this into English, and Oxford University Press has just brought it out. So, the different things I've done, and I think that that's how it should be. A literature must be able to practice different forms of writing and not just concentrate on one form. We are talking about multimedia, but within writing, I think there has to be a multimedia nature to it.
So, the entry in Wikipedia about you begins almost like this. You are one of the leading gay rights activists in India. So, could you elaborate on the kind of activism that you are involved in?
See, there are different kinds of activism, and my activism is literary and academic. It's not the activism of, say, people like Ashok Rao Kavi, who founded the Humsafar Trust in Bombay way back in 1990, or Bindu Madhav Khire, who founded the Sampathik Trust in Pune about 10-15 years ago, because that is grassroots activism. It has to do with field work and outreach work and so on. And but I'm not in that sector. I don't have a support group or anything, but I think that I think I've said this several times, that writing and activism are two sides of the same coin, not just for people like me, but for anyone who's concerned with with identity issues. Take Dalit literature, take a writer like the late Namdev Dhasal. I'm sure it was the same for him, that his writing and his activism were two sides of the same coin. I guess it's the same for many women writers. So, activism, yes, but activism through art and literature. And this is something that people don't understand. Marginal literatures, I think, have often been misread as literatures that have an agenda, that literatures that are propaganda, and that literatures that are inferior in terms of artistic ability. And all this is not true. It has to be dispelled, because one can have issues about which one is writing, and one can also be artistic and literary. Even Commonwealth literature began with that. I mean, wouldn't you say a writer like B.S. Naipaul or Salman Rushdie, don't they have issues that they are tackling in their work, and yet they are part of the canon? Whereas with gay writing particularly, and I am not the only one to be saying this, there are others who would endorse what I am saying. Somehow the feeling is that if you call yourself a gay writer, then it means your politics are being foregrounded and your art is taking a back seat, and that's not at all true. So, actually I am not sure whether I like the word activist, because the moment you invoke a word like activist, this is what people think, that writing is only an excuse for making political statements. But that's not how it is. My training is that of a literary scholar. I teach in an English department. I've been teaching for more than 25 years, and I think that for me, literary values in a work are as important, if not more important, than what you are writing about. So, that's my position, and also that if you take gay fiction, at the end of the day, it's about love. We don't make such a big issue when writers write about heterosexual love, which everybody is doing. So, I don't even like to use the word gay sometimes, because it's love. I mean, in some cases it's heterosexual love, in other cases it's homosexual love, but it's love. It's a love story. My novel The Boyfriend is a love story. My second novel, Hostel Room 131, is also a love story. My forthcoming novel, Lady Lolita's Lover, is also a love story. If the characters concerned belong to the same gender, that's just an accident. That's how I see it.
So, when we talk about your boyfriend, it deals with homoeroticism in a very apparent way, and it almost borders on onto pornography or something like that. So, how will you respond to such a
No, I'm very happy if you say that, because I don't have a moral position vis-a-vis pornography. I don't. If I say pornography is bad, then I'm assuming a very moral positionality, which is not what I do. I have frequently said that gay writing needs its own aesthetic. I recently said this at a conference, that gay writing does need its own aesthetic, and what that aesthetic would entail is also sexual explicitness, right? Now, one can go into the reasons for that and ask why gay love stories are more sexually explicit than heterosexual love stories, though I am not sure that that's always the case. But it is certainly part of my aesthetics, and so if you say verges on pornography, that makes me happy. It doesn't offend me. I don't believe in censorship and self-censorship, and I think that one must write as freely as one can, without bothering about offending people and so on, without worrying too much about worrying if something is obscene or vulgar or so on. I think that one has to write, and sex is very much a part of life. So, to say that you can't express it in a novel or in a short story or in a poem, I think is being a hypocrite. So, I'm totally against self-censorship, where writers think that, well, this is offending, and of course, we are living in times where you've got to be careful, because I think we are living in terrible times as far as censorship is concerned, and you don't want to do things that might get you into trouble for no reason, if it can be avoided or if it can be said in a roundabout way. That's a nice thing about English, incidentally, that a lot of the time you get away saying what you want to say, because the people who are likely to take offense don't even understand what you are saying. With the regional languages, they don't have that luxury, because whatever they say is immediately taken at face value. But no, I mean, pornography is all right. I am not making a distinction between pornography and non-pornography. If I want to write a sex scene, I'll write a sex scene, and if my publishers and editors don't have a problem with it and they let it be, then I think that it's nobody else's business to worry about it.
Okay, so you consider it as a matter of openness of the society?
Yes, yes. The other thing I wanted to say is that when I write a homosexual novel or short story or play or poem, I'm not self-conscious about it, and I'm not apologetic about it. There's a lot of gay writing, particularly in the regional languages, which tends to be apologetic. So it operates at a level where the person concerned is trying to come out to parents, is trying to come out to friends, and is having a lot of trouble doing that. My work is not like that. My characters are sort of in your face gay, and they realize that just as some people are straight, other people will be gay. So there is no point in being apologetic and um, you know and being self-conscious about it. So that's partly why you might read it as pornography, because it is in your face. If you take the boyfriend, I mean, UD is cruising. The very first chapter is called Gentleman, and it's set in a train station washroom in Bombay, the Churchgate station. And that has been a hot cruising spot for a long time, and he's cruising there, and he's not worried. Actually, he lives with his mother, but his mother has gone someplace, and he picks up a boy and takes him home because there's no one at home. But he's not self-conscious, or he's not guilt-ridden. What if my mother comes to know? And so I think that for me, being gay also has to do with decentering the idea of normativity. This whole business of being honest and being good and being monogamous and being faithful and being dutiful is a normative idea. So my stories unfold in a way which proves that for me the important thing is to dismantle the idea of normativity.
Professor Rao, you are one of the leading champions of LGBT writing. So, could you tell us something about the present position of LGBT writing and its place in the Indian syllabus? And maybe you must have put in some work to bring that into Indian syllabus, no?
Yes, there's a fair amount of LGBT writing by this time. Incidentally, LGBT stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. And by this point, there's a fair amount of it. There are two major anthologies which were brought out by a leading publisher, Penguin, in 1999. So that's a while ago. Yarana and Facing the Mirror. Yarana is gay writing from India, and Facing the Mirror is lesbian writing from India. But about 3 years ago, another anthology of queer writing came out. It was called Out, Stories from the New Queer India. And there have been full-fledged novels. There have been my novels, but there have been other novels and short stories as well that people have been writing. So I think the body of gay writing and lesbian writing it has existed and it will continue to exist. Then there has been the other kind of critical writing, of which there's also been quite a lot until this time. And these are by mainstream scholars. There's the book Phobic and Erotic. There's the book Same-Sex Love in India, readings from literature and history, edited by Ruth Manita and Salim Kidwai. There's the book Because I Have a Voice. There's the book Forbidden Sex Texts, written by Hoshang Merchant. And all these were published by major publishers. The publishers are Macmillan and Penguin, Routledge, Seagull. So the two kinds of writing go on simultaneously. There is the literary representation of same-sex love in the fiction and the poetry that we have, and then there's also the theorizing of it in these other books that I mentioned. So what happens is that by this point, there's also my own book, Whistling in the Dark, 21 Queer Interviews, which is made up of interviews with LGBT people. And the nice thing about that book is that it talks to people across a spectrum of values. So there are university professors, but there are also people who work as, say, auto drivers and so on. That book was almost done the way a sting operation is carried out, and my publisher Sage at that time was very cooperative. They allowed the book to go to press without even getting sort of written consent from some of the respondents, because we changed their names and so on. And we pointed out to them, to the publishers, that since we were asking very personal questions, people wouldn't give their consent. So we sometimes didn't even tell them that we were interviewing them for a book and so on. So there's all that work. So what happens at this point is that there's enough fiction, poetry, drama. There's Mahesh Dattani's plays as well, which I forgot to mention, and there's enough theoretical material available to start a very good university course at the PG level or even at the UG level. And in my own university, the University of Pune, I have been offering the course that I call it Queer Theory and Literature, but the syllabus calls it Alternative Literature. 2, Alternative Literature. 1 is Dalit writing, Dalit Sahitya. The University of Hyderabad has been offering a course for a long time. I think Kalyani in West Bengal, because wherever there are LGBT people on the faculty, you can be sure that they will want to start a course like that. So there's Niladri Chatterjee at Kalyani, there's Hoshang Merchant in Hyderabad, there's me in Pune, and then other universities. JNU, I think, has had several dissertations on LGBT studies. Delhi University, the major universities, and even the smaller ones, I think, are catching on. The thing about research is that one is obliged to look for new things to research, and in a way it's a bit opportunistic, because people just want to latch on to the bandwagon. So there's a lot of research going on which is not coming from conviction or anything. It's just that researchers are desperate to look for new areas of research, but the end result is that there are courses that are being taught, there's research at the MPhil and PhD levels, and that's going on. All this is a good thing, and I think the future for LGBT studies in Indian universities is bright. In Western universities, it has already been around for a long time, but Indian universities are finally, I think, catching on, and I think the years to come will see more and more work in this direction.
Professor Rao, there's something that's called cultural wars that has taken place in American universities, no? So is there something that is taking place, something that's similar to that in Indian universities with regard to the maybe inclusion of Dalit literature, LGBT studies and all that? Do you find some kind of resistance, or you find the opening up a very easy process?
No, it may not be easy. Like I just said, if it's visible now to a greater extent than it was visible earlier, it's partly because of the opportunism of teachers and students who are looking for new areas to research. This does not necessarily mean that they've overcome their own conservatism. And that's what I meant by saying that there's a bit of hypocrisy here, because they may be conservative, and yet they find that they have to be open to new areas of learning and new systems of knowledge and new kinds of research. Also, furthermore, the change happens more in the cities than in the smaller universities. So the universities that I mentioned are, of course, the metro universities. In the smaller universities, in the undergrad colleges, I'm not sure whether the same changes are reflected there. Because academia tends to be conservative. Academia, I think, is the slowest to take note of changes that go on around us. I mean, there are English departments that are still stuck with Shakespeare and the um, writers of the English literary canon, and they are completely unwilling to go beyond that and explore new areas and new territories. Um, so, so it's varied. I don't think in a country as vast as India you can generalize. There would be universities which are very forward-looking and even radical, but equally there would be lots of other university departments of English which are extremely conservative. This this conservatism is a result of lethargy on the part of teachers who are unwilling to uh, acquaint themselves with newer things. I mean, I'm sure there are lots of teachers who still depend on their own notes which they took during their own student days, and this is what they do in the class. So there's all kinds of universities, and I don't think one can generalize. But a change has been made, a beginning, not a change, a beginning has been made, and I hope I'm optimistic that as the years go by, we'll see um, more a greater willingness. Let me put it that way. We'll see a greater willingness on the part of teachers and students to acquaint themselves with new things.
Professor Rao, from the academic side, we will move on to the social side. Recently, the Supreme Court of India has again recriminalized same-sex love and same-sex intercourse and things like that. And so, how will you comment on such a verdict and its impact on the Indian society?
You know, I think so much has been written about this in the newspapers, in the media. I myself write a weekly column for a tabloid newspaper in Pune, and frequently talked about this judgment and its implications. Needless to say, it's extremely unfortunate that a judgment like that came out. I might tell you that nobody expected it. Everybody thought that the Supreme Court would uphold the Delhi High Court judgment of July 2009. So I think it came as a big blow and a big shock to all concerned, including people in the legal profession. I was reading a book called Courting Injustice. It's by a lawyer by the name of Rajesh Talwar, and he was one of the first people to file a petition in the Delhi High Court for the scrapping of Section 377, even before the Nas Foundation did it. And his book came out before the 2013 judgment. And he says somewhere in the book that he almost takes it for granted that the Supreme Court will uphold the verdict of the Delhi High Court. So when that 13th or was it 11th December judgment of 2013 came out, it was a big shock to all of us and a very unfortunate thing to happen. So what can one say? I mean, Supreme Court judgments are final and binding. They can't be challenged, although there is a curative petition pending in the Supreme Court to rehear the case. And that in a way is the only option now. The government certainly isn't going to do anything about changing the law. So that's where we are, and it's a big setback. I mean, there's nothing more I can say, because you can't appeal against a Supreme Court judgment, and it's a big setback because technically it even makes an interview like this a criminal activity, because if a certain kind of love is illegal, then talking about
cannot
it
even
and writing about it should also be illegal. So that's where we are. I mean, I think it's a stalemate, and we are up against a wall, and I don't know.
Okay, Professor, thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed giving you this interview,
Okay.
and I hope it's useful to the students who will see the program. Thank you.